All right, guys, we're going to be learning about Chapter 12, Lesson 2, which happens to be the transportation revolution that was happening between 1790s to around 1860s, the turn of the Industrial Revolution. So I'm sorry, I'm turning to the pages that I need, so if I'm distracted, I apologize. So let's go ahead and get this started. We're going to start with number 2 and the turnpikes. A definition of a turnpike is a privately owned road built by either companies or an individual, and the purpose of it is to provide a roadway from city to city or parts of a city, and people pay tolls to use the roads, and the money collected from the tolls are used to finance the road and protect the road. So after the American Revolution, the government began to realize the importance of expanding westward for trade and development, specifically George Washington. So every president worried about expanding westward for trade and for development. And by 1791, states began to build toll roads or turnpikes. The first national turnpike was the Cumberland Road, and that was built by James Madison. So as you can see from this picture above, it's usually a building on the road. You had a person, an attendant who was in charge of that part of the road collecting the tolls. And you would put this bar down in front of the road, and then if you wanted to pass it, he would release the bar so that you could go through. Many of these early toll roads kept the name turnpikes, and it conveyed to people that a charge would be made for using the road. Some of the turnpikes were nearly 200 miles long. So let's talk about number 1 on your paper about Daniel Boone. He actually, in 1769, will explore the Appalachian Mountains looking for a route through them. He followed what's known as a warrior's path or an Indian path, and he will bring over 30 skilled foresters with him to clear a trail for the pioneers. He will bring over 200 families with him, but he will lose over 50 men on building and clearing this trail for the pioneers. Later, it became known as the Wilderness Road, and it was barely wide enough for wagons and carts to go through. But over 100,000 people will travel his road between 1775 and 1790, and they will settle what we call today as Kentucky. All right. One of the first roads I want to talk about is the National Road. It's known as Highway 1 today, and expanded from Baltimore, Maryland, all the way over to Illinois, and Vandalia, I believe is the name, and then from St. Louis. Many of your wagon trains started in either Liberty, Illinois, or they would start in what we know as today as St. Louis, and they would use the Missouri River, the one that Lewis and Clark used for their travels, and they would trek all the way over to Oregon. But this road was built in 1811 by James Madison. He got the federal government to fund it. It was the first road or turnpike built by your federal government, and it will inspire people to move westward because now there is a road that they could follow. It connected the west back to the east, and this is what's important to know. A lot of your roads and early railroads will head east to west, west to east, to connect people moving westward back to their families in the east and back to produce and goods. Now let's talk about another era of transportation besides roads. Now we're going to have what's known as the era of the steamboat travel. Let's start with the man who built the first steamboat in America. Robert Fulton is his name. He's number 5 on your paper. He will develop a more powerful steamboat, which made two-way river travel possible, and he began what's known as the riverboat era. Robert Fulton actually went over to England because he heard of a steam engine that a man developed. The man's name is James Watts, and the first place the man used his steam engine was in factories. Then Robert Fulton heard about somebody putting them on boats. So he went over to England to see how they were utilizing a steam engine on boats. As you can see here, Robert Fulton's boat had a big, huge engine underneath it in this area of the ship, and that's what you have, the big stovepipe and the smoke billowing out. He had paddle wheel in the center of his boat. Later, they'll put the paddle wheels on the back of the boat. But What's important to know about steamboat travel is it made it cheaper and faster way to travel and your ship your goods. It also made two-way river travel possible, so keep that in mind, two-way river travel. Before you could only go downriver, but the steam-powered engine makes it possible for you to go back up river, and it saves people hundreds and thousands of dollars to ship their goods. And keep in mind the keywords are faster and cheaper way of travel and shipping goods. And transportation for people became faster and cheaper for them to travel back and forth. So if you moved westward, you had a way to go back home if you needed to. Another type of transportation that will be built, like the National Highway was built, is the Erie Canal will be built. A canal is a man-made river. So you might want to put that down under Erie Canal. It was a man-made river, mainly built by the hands of Irish immigrants. They were promised $1 a day to help build this road, and it took hundreds of men and over 9 years to build it from Lake Erie. And it trekked across New York State all the way to the Hudson River. And you do need to remember, because your STAR test had it on there, that it is connected to the Hudson River. The Hudson River then goes down into New York, where the New York Harbor is. So what's important about this is that after the Erie Canal was finished in 1825, it will bring in the era of the canal systems for shipping goods. It's over 300 miles long. But all of these towns along Erie Canal did not exist until after the canal was finished. So it lowered the cost of shipping goods, it lowered the cost of transportation, and it increased the popularity of river towns, and they became very prosperous because factories, after the steam engine, they could also use the canal as a water source, and then later steam engine power will be used inside these factories. So they became even more prosperous because you could build a factory now anywhere, not just along a water resource. As you can see, by 1840, all of these canals are connecting major cities and major towns, major waterways like the Ohio River down here, connecting all of these regions. So if you were a farmer living in between a major river, you now had a way to ship your goods faster and cheaper. Talking about these farmers in the western frontier, it is the #1 source of jobs for people to have, because now they can own their own land, and they had a way to provide for their own families. But western settlement and the pioneers, people tended to settle along communities within rivers, and others from their home communities with others from the home community. So it's not just you by yourself. Sometimes it's several family members leaving together so that they're not separated. But rivers were important for several reasons. It's a source of water for your farms and your family, but it's also a source of transportation for your family and their goods. Later, families will settle along canals and even railroads. Same idea with rivers. Later on, they'll settle near railroads as a faster form of transportation. All right, so as you can see, between 1820 and 1860, your eyes will see all of the major cities that are starting to develop. And a key component of being able to expand westward is the transportation through highways being built and later railroad systems.